Hey there everyone, it's Joe from Ainslie's Gold Silver Standard Insights, brought to you by goldsilverstandard.com and ainslieBullion.com.au. Today's topic is no China to the rescue this time. Now that's posted on the Ainslie website. I'll put a link below for you to follow along. And of course we have Chris Tipper here to break down the morning's news. And joining Chris today is Alex Hutchinson from Siltech Precious Metals. So Chris and Alex, over to you.
Thanks, Joe. China's Communist Party runs some of the world's most extensive public control policies, so any widespread protests, like the ones we're witnessing at the moment, give us all the more reason to stop and pay attention. We've been thinking that we're approaching the end of the zero COVID policy era and preparing for reopening, but now we're back into a period of increasing uncertainty. So Alex is joining us today to break it all down, as she always does, and to give us a little bit of background about where China is currently and where it fits into this picture going forward. So welcome back, Alex.
Thank you for having me again, Chris.
So can you start us off with just a little bit of background of what's going on here? Because I found myself actually that this news was sort of out there last week. We were starting to see stuff emerging probably on Twitter and around the place, but it only has come out in the last couple of days in the more mainstream publications, and that you're starting to read that here as well. So it's a story that's sort of been building in the background, but probably everyone's not really aware of what's going on just yet.
Yeah, so the Australian dollar's dropped a full cent basically since Friday on the back of what's going on in China. Now in China at the moment, like you were talking about, there's riots all over the country. So what's going on there? Well, there's a lot of things that have happened, but the final straw of this, to cause these riots was in the Jiangxing province. Some neighbours have filmed this apartment building that was locked down, burning, while fireys couldn't get through and stood at a barricade and just aimlessly, I guess, tried to put this fire out, and 10 people died in it. Now, what's going on in the world right now is you've got the World Cup, which Chinese, are watching, and you've got stadiums full of people from all over the world with no masks watching soccer games. And currently 1/5 of China is under lockdown.
And I did see actually something which I wasn't sure how accurate it was, but there was footage of censoring that was going on with the World Cup in the footage that they were seeing in China, where they were effectively blurring out the crowd so that you couldn't see that everyone was sitting there without masks on.
Yeah, a blurred out crowd is still a crowd in these huge stadiums. So, it's becoming fairly obvious to China that the world's moved on and they're in a position that they can't. And, it still comes down to some of the policies and the reaction of people there. They have never imported Pfizer. They've got their own national vaccine, but no one's going and using it because everyone's been safe for so long. Like the COVID zero policy worked for a long time, but the world is open now and they can't hold it back. So they're protecting their elderly and their hospital system. And, what else can they do?
Well, I was reading something along a similar vein that you really can't come out of this situation easily if you're in China's shoes, because you either double down on zero COVID and lock everybody down, which is obviously not working at the moment. So they're going to have to ramp up the levels of control to do that. Or you approach the opening, but that's going to result in a lot more cases and a lot more concern and distress in the community as well, which requires a heavy hand. So it's really not a great looking situation all around out there at the moment.
No, it's not for China. And they're starting to talk about there being a lot of shortages of goods, especially on Apple iPhones. Foxconn at the moment is in an area of China where it's under lockdown. Now, they normally need 350,000 staff and they can't get them at the moment. So it's causing a lot of issues for Chinese exports, and it's causing a lot of distress for their people.
It's not a great situation. So I just want to change the topic slightly. We were talking a little bit in the news article today and just generally looking at the demographics in China.
Yeah.
So we really have almost a split system starting to emerge. And I know it goes along the line with the protests as well, where it tends to be driven by a lot of young people. But if you've got sort of a young demographic and an older demographic at odds, that will probably be behind some of this, but also behind some of the complications of the issues that come out of it. So what's your sort of take on that?
Well, in the article today, we talked about there being a youth unemployment rate of about 18 to 20% at the moment. So that's people aged up until about 24. Many are struggling to find work, but many are actually looking at their parents who've been doing these manufacturing jobs and would leave the country towns, go work in the city and visit their family once or twice a year. So they're looking at what their parents struggled with and going, don't want to do it, cost of living pressures. So there's actually this viral thing going on in China at the moment called the lying flat movement, which is just Chinese saying enough, we don't really want to work like our parents used to work. And we've spoken about before about the aging demographic of China. So you've got less and less people supporting a much bigger and much older and aging population. And they don't really want to work like them. So there's, the output's got to drop on the back of that because, people want a 9-to-5 job. They don't want these 12, 16-hour days where you're staying off site, like the Foxconn jobs. And then, look at what's happened in the last probably 3 or 4 years. There's, the Communist Party has been focusing more on, I guess, communism, which is fine. You've got all these billionaires that they're sort of starting to say you've made too much money, modesty. They're encouraging modesty. So
they were encouraging the opposite of that not that long ago, weren't they? They were
that's right.
Heralding these
capitalism on steroids. And now they've turned around and said, actually, someone like Jack Ma, go away quietly, disappear. So these people that, Chinese youths could have looked up to and thought, if we struggle through this and we work hard, we could become a Jack Ma. Well, no one wants to be that anymore because it's too extreme and it's not being encouraged. So there was another example I found on Huawei, I can't pronounce that, sorry, where their culture that is spoken about is called the wolf culture, which is kill or be killed. So it's just these cultures that have been work hard, continued struggle, I think is the term the Communist Party uses. But youths now have had enough. So they're choosing to turn away from consumerism and kill or be killed.
And there's more opportunity to possibly do that too when you think about the role of technology. Sometimes if you're a young person, you can sit at home and live on potentially less consumer products if you've got the technology that can substitute, I suppose. Yeah. So if we pull all that together, where does this leave us? Because China really was necessary to bring us out of the GFC. Like, we know that without the rapid growth that was occurring in China at the time, it would have been a much more challenging situation around the world. And we also know that we're either in a recession already, quite likely, but we're certainly, everyone seems to agree, we will be in a global recession next year. So we know there's slowdown to come generally. If we don't, first of all, do we have China there as a backup in this scenario? Because it's sounding a bit like we don't. If we don't have them, where does that really leave us?
Well, I guess after the GFC, and I'm not going to get these numbers right, but I think China's growth was 7 to 9%, something like that, year on year. And they, pumped their economy full of money. It's why there was a huge commodity boom in Australia straight afterwards. Right now, you can see China reacting to a property bubble. On Wednesday this week, they announced about a $70 billion bump to the banks to loosen the lending standards again. So they're they're now looking at the property market and trying to save it after a year of inaction. So they must be thinking something else is going on. In October, world exports from China dropped 0.3%. Now they're aiming for a 5.5% increase year on year. So that's a huge increase that they need for internally if things are dropping externally. But you've got 1/5 of their country in lockdown. So I don't know where that's going to come from. And I mean, the US had a drop of 12.6% year on year so far of Chinese imports. the other interesting one, which is, you know, we've spoken about inflation being driven by certain things, and freight was one of them. Well, freight now, you jump from about $2,500 US per shipping container, Shanghai to LA. It then during COVID went to $25,000 US per shipping container, and we're now, I believe I've heard, around $1,800 US per shipping container, and that's on the back of huge increases in fuel. So
that really right there highlights it, doesn't it? That's a massive drop where you're actually lower than where we started.
Yeah, and that was driving some of the inflation. So a lot of what's going on in China right now is going to be very anti-inflationary. And then you've got all these revised forecasts down. Barclays is now saying 2%. Nomura came out last week. Now I'm going to have to look this one up. So Nomura came out last week and they're saying 2.8%. And you've still got China saying 5.5%. So long way off.
Possible. Yeah,
no. So, you know, it seems to me that potentially China could exacerbate the situation this time, not be the savior it was last time.
Well, on that cheery note, we might wrap it up there. But thank you for that today, Alex. There's an interesting story developing there that we need to be watching, and more so bringing our attention to where that leaves us going forward, because I think we've all become very accustomed to that growth out of China being the Hail Mary pass that always saves us when these things go wrong in the rest of the West. So if that's not going to happen this time, then we need to be paying attention to see where that can come from. If it's not from China, where else is that coming from to get us out of that situation going forward?
We'll just wait and see. It's got to come from somewhere. Otherwise, we're all just going to keep going down. There's going to be a big deflation, which I think everyone thinks is going to happen in assets anyway.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again. And we'll leave you to it this week, and we'll see you again next week, which will probably be our last one of the year. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris.
See you, Alex.
Thanks so much for being on the show once again, Alex and Chris. I'll see you on the next one. And of course, to the audience, I want you to head over to the Discord channel. That's discord.gg/gold, the perfect way to continue the conversation. Alex and Chris will be there for the next 1 or 2 hours after the upload of this video. So head over there, ask your questions, get a response, and tell us your feedback. We really want to hear from you. I always want you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Ainslie Bullion for the wide range of informational videos that we post 5 days a week, including specials and much, much more. And while you're on the internet, head over to goldsilverstandard.com, because that's bringing gold and silver into the digital world. As we say here at the end, balance your wealth in an unbalanced world. Take care, and we'll see you next time.